Hi, and thank you for joining me. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how I make coils without dry burning. And so when I say make a coil, what I'm referring to is constructing an RBA, or rebuildable atomizer. That means twisting the wire inside of the atomizer so that you can vaporize the e-juice and e-liquid. I'm going to demonstrate two ways to make coils. One is to construct an RTA, or rebuildable tank atomizer, and an RDA, a rebuildable dripping atomizer. Now, when I say without dry burning, what I'm referring to is heating the wire, the atomizing wire, so that it's red hot and glowing. So that you're putting direct power through without any wicking material, without any e-juice on it, and you're just basically dry burning the coil. And the reason I make coils without dry burning, and why I recommend that you never dry burn your coil, is because what happens when you dry burn metal is that you actually are destroying the internal structure of the metal. There was a position paper put out in May of 2015 by a pretty well-known researcher in vapor products by the name of Dr. Konstantinos Farsalinos. He's a cardiologist and researcher out of Greece. And his website is called e-cigarette-research.org. And he put out a position paper called Dry Burning Metal Coils, Is It a Good Thing? Dr. Farsalinos got together with a material sciences expert by the name of Pedro Carvalho. Mr. Carvalho has a background on metal structure, composition, and degradation. And what they suggested is that vapors never dry burn their coils, not even once, because you are damaging the structure of the metal underneath. And so you're starting out your vaping, if you dry burn, basically with a damaged coil. Now, when I say dry burning the coil, what I'm referring to is heating the coil to a temperature at least 700 degrees Celsius or 1300 degrees Fahrenheit. So at these elevated temperatures, it is possible that not only do you see breakdown of the metal that you're then going to use for vaping, but the metal could also emit some pretty toxic substances. And Dr. Farsalinos, in his position paper about dry burning of coils, what he said is that it is possible at elevated temperatures like dry burning that chromium could be converted into its hexavalent form. Now, hexavalent chromium is a highly toxic carcinogen, definitely something you do not want to be inhaling. And what he says is that it is possible that if you are heating this metal, to such a degree where it's red hot and glowing, you could be creating this hexavalent chromium. And really, just regular vaping, you'd never heat the metal to that elevated temperature. The reason he was so concerned about chromium is that some of the wires we use for vaping, like Canthal A1, Nichrome 80, and 316L stainless steel, all contain chromium, and so we have to make sure that we're not heating it and converting the chromium into its hexavalent form. Now, the reasons people often will dry burn their coil is to check for homogeneous distribution of temperature over the coil length, to avoid hot spots, and to also clean the metal residues from manufacturing. What Dr. Farsalinos says is that you should not do this at all. You should instead, if you have a coil that you want to replace rather than dry burning it, simply make a new coil. He says that if you want to exploit and use the last watt that the device can give you, then you might find it impossible to do it without dry burning the coil. But then, do not expect to be exposed to the same levels of harmful substances as vapors not doing it. What he says is that even if you're dry burning coils, it does not make vaping worse than smoking. That would simply be an incorrect assessment. But what he does say is that we should be looking at vaping as an absolute, something in its own right, and that if we're looking at things in their own terms, let's try to make it as safe as possible. And one of the ways he suggests is to make your coils without dry burning the metal, not even once. And so let's dive down, and I'll show you how I make coils, my technique for doing this without any dry burning. Okay, so let's get started. The two things I'm going to be building today are the tank is going to be the first generation sub-tank mini from Kanger, and the RDA we're going to be building is called the Sapor RDA from Witofo. So let me show you some of the tools I use when I build coils. One of the first things we have to make sure you want is some way to cut your wire. So this is a wire cutter. This is another cutter. This will be for the cotton. Tweezers. Some small screwdrivers. An ohm meter. And this is going to tell us the resistance of the coil once we make it. Some cotton. I'm going to use this samurai cotton. It's organic cotton from Japan. I like using a coil jig, and that's what this is, with the little posts that go in the jig. You don't necessarily have to use a coil jig. I just find making coils with this to be a lot easier. And of course the wire. The wire we're going to be using is called Kanthal A1. I'm going to be using two different gauges or thicknesses. One is going to be 28 gauge and the other is 26 gauge. I'm going to be using 28 gauge for the RTA, or the tank, and I'm going to be using 26 gauge for the RDA, which is the dripper. You also are going to need paper towel and distilled water. And of course, some sort of mod or device to make your coil vape, and also e-juice of some sort. This is our line called Essential Flavors. This is called Chillax, which is a very, very nice vanilla mint. I'm also going to use an app on my phone called Vapor Calc. It's going to show me how to construct the coil properly so that I hit my target resistance. Vapor Calc is just one of many apps you can use. This app is for an Android phone. I'm sure if you have an Apple, there are other things you can use. There are websites you can use. There's lots of resources available so that you can learn how to construct your coil to hit the target resistance and to make it exactly to match your vaping style. Alright, first thing we're going to do is determine what kind of coil we're going to make. I'm going to use Vapor Calc, and I'm going to choose the Coil Calc. There are a number of different options here, so I'm going to choose Kanthal A1. You can see this has a number of different types of wires that you can choose from. For the tank, I'm going to do 28 gauge. Usually I'm going to try to make a coil that's above 1 ohm, and usually if you're going to go around 1 ohm or have 1 ohm be your target resistance, you're going to use 28 gauge Kanthal A1. If you're going to go below 1 ohm, maybe around a 0.5 or 0.6 or something like that, you can use 26 gauge Kanthal. I'm going to do a single coil inside of the RTA. My target resistance, I'm going to try to get to 1.2 ohms. The inner diameter I'm going to use is 2.4 millimeters, and then the total length of the coil is going to be 4 millimeters. It's telling me I should do around 6 wraps, and that will give me my target resistance. Okay, the tank that we're going to use is going to be the Kanger Sub-Tank Mini. We have you can get regular coils, like manufactured coils for this, but this is the RBA deck that it comes with. And I'm going to unscrew the chimney cap and unscrew the chimney, and the whole deck came with it, which is okay. There's the deck. You can see that these are very, very small. And actually, you know what? There's one other thing that I use when I make these coils, and that's just because I can't always see these very, very tiny, and so I use a magnifying glass. I'm not going to use it for this video because I'm not sure how it will work, but I usually use a magnifying glass. I got that at a local art supply store, because the decks on these RDAs and RTAs are usually very, very small. and so this is certainly no exception. All right, so for this we're going to use 28 gauge Kanthal, which is right here. Open it up. This is a fresh roll of 28 gauge Kanthal, and I'm gonna cut about between about 6 inches or so off of this. All right, one of the first things you want to do after you cut a piece of wire from your spool is clean it. Now remember, we're not going to be dry burning this coil, and so you want to get, if there's any machine oil or any impurities on the wire, you want to clean it and get that off first. So I took a piece of towel, paper towel, and I got some distilled water on it, and I'm going to run the wire just through the towel. And you can clearly see that this wire is pretty dirty. And what you want to do is run the wire through the towel at least 8 or 10 times. And what you want to do is keep doing this until it comes through the paper towel nice and clean. Okay, so we've done it about 10 times, and it's coming through nice and clean. I'm not seeing any residue at all. And so this wire is ready to wrap. So I'm going to take my coil jig, and I'm going to take a 2.4 millimeter post out of my little bag that came with my coil jig. And the way this coil jig works is that you unscrew the little screw on the side, and that's where the post goes. And then you unscrew the screw on the top, and that's where the wire goes. And so what you do with this is you place the wire into the top screw, hold it down, and now I can wrap it around the post on the bottom. Now you can use a screwdriver, and there are lots of different types of these things. I use this one. There really is no right or wrong. In terms of what you can use to wrap it. You just want to make sure it has the right diameter that you're going for. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by taking the wire, putting it underneath of the post, and I'm going to wrap it around the post 6 times, and that's going to hopefully give me a 1.2 ohm resistance. And so here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You want to have the wires going in opposite directions. Now if you don't have them perfect, that's okay, because what you're going to do is then push the wire against the side here and let it spring back. Kanthal, at least 28 gauge, is pretty springy. You want to make sure that none of the wraps are touching each other, and so you can actually take your thumb, your fingernail, and just pull it apart and make sure none of the wraps are touching each other. Remember, this is going to be a coil that we're making without dry burning, and so we're going to make a spaced coil. We're not going to pinch this coil or dry burn it at all. So you want to make sure that there is space between all of the wraps that you do on here. Okay, so after you wrap your coil, I'm going to pull the coil off of the jig, and here I have my coil. Now I'm going to take the deck, unscrew the screws on either post, place the coil just inside of either of the post, and then I'm going to screw it down. I'm going to take the other wire, put it inside of the other post, and screw that down. I'm going to give each wire a little bit of a tug, and this is moving a little bit, so I'm going to make it a little tighter. Okay, it's not moving, that's not moving either. Take the wire cutter and then snip the wire as close as you possibly can, because you do not want any wire sticking out. if the wire is sticking out of where the post is, and when you put this chimney cap on, if it touches the chimney cap, it's going to short out. Now what I'm going to do is take the coil jig, pull this little post out of here. I'm going to put the post inside of the coil, and then I can move this around. You want to center it right on top of the air hole, so the air coming up through the atomizer will hit the coil and hit your e-juice that's going to be sucked up through the cotton wick. And so there you go. Now, if there's any part of the coil that's touching each other, so if any of the wraps are touching each other, you can take your tweezers, insert it in here, and if you want to pull it a little bit, you can. You don't want to make it too deformed, but you definitely do not want to have any pieces of metal touching another piece of metal. You want to have a nice spaced coil. Alright, so after we make our coil, let's check, before we put the cotton in, let's check the resistance to make sure that we hit our target resistance. I'm going to put it on the ohm meter. What we were going for here was a 1.2 ohm coil. I'm going to screw on the ohm meter, and we got 1.23, which is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. No reason to remake it. Okay, now it's time for the cotton. This is organic Japanese cotton. I'm going to cut about a 1/4 inch of the cotton off and then roll. You're going to roll this in your hands, being very careful with it. You don't want to break it. Remember, it's cotton. It pulls apart real easily. And so I'm just going to roll this together into a tube, into a nice tube. Now you don't want it too tight, but you don't want it too loose. You want to make sure the juice can flow through it. Okay, and then you take your coil and you pull the cotton through it. Now this is a lot more cotton than we need. I'm going to cut the ends off. Just like that. I'm going to take the chimney cap. Put it on top. And I'm going to take the cotton and push it down into the juice channels. Now if you look on the deck, you'll see these little tiny holes kind of at the bottom. Those are the juice channels. That's where the juice is going to flow into the cotton and then through the top and into the atomizing coil. Okay, after you have the cotton in, we are going to prime the cotton. That means taking our e-juice, and I'm going to put some e-juice right on the cotton. You don't want to soak it too much, but you do want to get it wet so that you can vape. So I'm just putting a little bit of e-juice right on the cotton, on either side and on the coil. And I'll do a little vaping test, see how it vapes. Just to show you that we're going to put this right into the tank and start vaping from here. So this coil has never been dry burned, and you can see it's creating some vapor. That's exactly what we want. The coil never got hot. It was never dry burned. You can go ahead and fill your tank as you would. You want to put the chimney cap on. If you forget to put the chimney cap on, you're going to make a mess. Fill your tank with e-juice, put it on, and you should be ready to vape. Okay, the next thing we're going to build is the Sapor RDA. This is a real nice RDA, excellent flavor. Has airflow up here at the top, which is very nice, gives you a nice smooth hit. So I'm going to take the top cap off and show you what the deck looks like. The Sapor has a 4-post deck, so you can see there's 4 holes. And so with this RDA, you have to make a dual coil. You cannot make a 1 coil. With most RTAs, you would use 1 coil, although there are many dual coil RTAs. This is a dual coil RDA. Okay, so let's check back with the vapor calc and see how many wraps we're going to do for each coil in this RDA. I'm going to click on coil calc. I'm going to be using Kanthal A1. We're going to be using 26 gauge Kanthal. We're not doing a single coil, but we're going to do a dual coil. Target resistance is going to be a little lower with a dual coil. With dual coils, what happens is you have power coming through the positive post and then splitting, and so your resistance is going to be half. So if I do two, let's say 1 ohm wraps, I'm going to try to get a 0.5. If it's 0.6, I'm not going to be too upset about that. The diameter, I'm going to do a little bit wider. I'm going to do a 3 millimeter diameter for the RDA, and so what it's saying is 7 wraps for each coil. Alright, so because we're going to do 2 wraps, I'm going to take 26 gauge Kanthal and I'm going to cut 2 pieces, both around 6 to 8 inches in length. And then I'm going to clean both pieces of wire. Okay, I got my coil jig. I'm going to take the 3 millimeter post this time, since we're doing the dripper. Put that into the top piece, screw that down so it's tight. I'm going to take the wire, insert the wire into the top screw, tighten it down so it's tight. This time we're going to do 7 wraps around here, and when we're done we're going to have both leads going the same way. Because in order to get it into the dripper, you're going to have both leads going the same way through the posts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm going to make sure that both leads are going the same direction. Now 26 gauge is not as springy as 28. I can push this against the side and let it spring back. And then most likely some of these might be a little closer than I'd like, because we're not doing any dry burning, you have to make sure that you have a spaced coil. Okay, so here's the RDA. What I've done is I've taken this tool and used the hex tool here to unscrew all of the post heads. And now I'm going to take my coil and stagger it and insert it. So I'm going to insert one on the negative post on the end, and then one through the third positive post from there. So you're going to stagger it, place it in, take the hex screw and screw these down to the tight. Pull on it, make sure it's tight. Now I'm going to take my coil jig, take the post out. Now I can put the post in here, and now I can move this. Make sure it stays nice and cylindrical. And I'm just going to kind of push it. I'm going to pull these wires apart a little bit, just so it's centered as best you can. You don't want to have any pieces of metal sticking out beyond the rim. If this coil in any way touches the chimney or touches the sides of the atomizer, you're going to get a hard short. And then if you're on a regulated box mod, it just simply will not fire. So there we go, that's pretty good. And then I'm going to take my tweezers or my wire snippers and snip as close as you can Okay, now I'm going to take the second coil and put it through the other two posts, again staggered. I'm going to use this bar to straighten it out. And then screw down both leads. Give them a pull, make sure they're good. Take my wire cutters, and again, you want to snip off the wires as close as you possibly can. And make sure that no leads are sticking out of the one side. Then again, I'm going to just take my fingernail and my thumb, just kind of push the wire over to the middle. Again, make sure that I have a nice spaced coil. Okay, let's screw it onto the ohm meter and see how close we got to, what are we going to for? 0.5, 0.6? Let's see what we got. We got 0.55, right in the middle, between 0.5 and 0.6. It's a good resistance for me. I'm very happy with that. And so I'm going to keep it. If there was, if it doesn't come out quite right, you just pull the wires out and then try it again. You really, once you start bending wire, it's very difficult to make it straight again. What happens when you bend metal is you create tiny imperfections inside of the metal. And so getting a bent wire straight again is kind of difficult. So, if your resistance is not exactly what you like, you're just going to have to pull the wires out and do it again. Now with the RDA, your cotton doesn't have to be quite as precise as the tank. You can have much thicker cotton in there because you're just pouring juice right on top of it. And so just like the other one, what we're going to do is run the cotton through the coil. So you want to get the cotton directly through it. Just like this. Take the tweezers and stuff it underneath. Okay, so this RDA is done, and it's not going to win any awards for being beautiful. It's not real complicated, but it will be functional and will vape pretty nicely. What you're going to do now is put your e-juice of your choice on top of the RDA, wick it up real nice, and then you can vape away. Put the chimney cap on and you can vape. This, again, it's a spaced coil, not dry burned. Hi, so I want to thank you for joining me, and I hope this video was informative for you. Please feel free to use the technique and to make coils in this way if you like, without dry burning. Vaping as an industry is very new, and I think we're still discovering and learning a lot about what it is we're doing with vaporization technology. I think the recognition that dry burning your coils is a bad thing is somewhat new to a lot of people. And I hope that, as we go and as new information comes to light, that we're all able to look at things a little bit differently and maybe adapt to new information, change the way we're doing things so that we can make vaping safer and better for everybody. Thank you.